And I will call the special meeting of the Comfort Lake Forest Watershed District to order. And our topics tonight are the budget. Had a pre-meeting on the budget. And then we wanted to also add, didn't we, Mike? Yeah, the issue with the AIS treatment on Forest Lake and Bone Lake. So let's do that one first. And Mike, I'll let you take over.
Do we want to do a roll call to see who's here?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Manager Loaf. Manager Schmaltz.
Here.
Manager Baki.
Here.
Manager Taves.
Here.
President Anderson.
Here.
Madam President, managers, so in consultation with Attorney Holtman, the district is able to add something as an I guess something we constitute as an emergency item. And so we've given proper notice of that, but the Curly Pond retreatment for Forest Lake, DNR has stocked the lake with a new species of walleye, as well as turns out Bone Lake as well. And so both of those, Madam President, to answer your question, so that that species is somewhat intolerable of the dicot that we've used in the past. So the DNR denied our original permit application for the product in question, and then as a result, the only herbicide that would be compatible is this other one, and however the price is 2 times the other of the dicot. So right now, so we're asking for approval to spend up to $80,000. There is 25,000 in essence left over from the tri-party agreement from the previous year that the city would be agreeable to release for, or to be agreeable to as a member to be used on this particular situation. And so, and then also to authorize me to enter in a contract to do so.
There's probably some extra money. I should have looked at this before we came, but in the AIS budget, there always tends to be that. I can't imagine that we didn't have some extra there too. So.
Well, yes, but this would be probably out of the range of what we would normally.
That's what I thought. It always is. But what do you mean? You mean it's out of the range for?
Of what
dollars?
extra we would have within the AIS budget alone.
Oh, no, not alone.
Yeah.
I'm saying you weren't sure that there was enough. I think between those two, we had enough.
Questions by any of the managers?
Wasn't there a motion that was presented by Chuck?
Yes.
Can you pull that up?
Pull up it's actually. Several, let's see. Oh, we didn't have to do it.
One was to authorize the transfer and the use of the funds. And then the other one was to authorize you
Right,
to make all the arrangements.
Wasn't there an authorization for Forest Lake and then one for Bone Lake?
No, I thought the authorizations were for those separate things that I just talked about.
Right. That's what three.
Maybe. He's looking for it.
Yeah. Is there gonna be anything on Moody this year? Cause the southeast bay is already all merged weeds. Aquatic plants, sorry.
Thank you.
I mean,
I'm trying to find it.
I just emailed
Okay.
you as well, so.
Of course, my email's being slow.
Yes, the first motion, is to amend the 2025 budget for account 3-001-28-G Forest AIS management plan to $110,000 and to transfer 60,000 from account 000-2900 fund balance to account 3-011-28-G.
Right. Anyone making that motion? I don't think we need to talk about it anymore, do we?
President Anderson,
Yes.
Administrator Kenny, would you like to discuss the additional information we received from RedPath regarding the fund balance and cash availability?
Yes.
So we've been working with accountants at RedPath. They've been tracking our fund balance throughout the year. They had indicated the fund balance calculation on the most recent treasurer's report. It was a little bit confusing the way it was presented, and I think it made it look a little bit higher than it was. It's actually really, there may be the difference between the cash balance in the bank account and the actual fund balance is actually pretty significant. It might look like there's 1.2 million in the fund balance. However, a bunch of that is dedicated funds, whether it be unearned grant revenue, the stormwater impact fund, permit escrows, things like that, dedicated funds that we have been tracking and sending to RedPath. And the fund balance as of March 31st, which is the most updated that they could do, is 370,000. So if the board were to process a $60,000 transfer from the fund balance, it would bring that down to approximately 309,000. We need the fund balance in order to pay the bills between now and when we receive our first levy settlement, which comes in early July. And so doing this transfer, there is a chance that it will bring the fund balance dangerously low. And so in order to pay the bills, we would need to be tapping into funds that are dedicated for other purposes.
Or we take out a loan. So that's another option.
The Clean Water Partnership loan, aquatic invasive species is not.
No, I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about a bank loan. We can borrow up to $2 million from a local bank. So that's always an option. It's not surprising to me that we're in this spot. It isn't. Our annual reports from the auditors have pointed that out. And so we'll be talking about that more on the budget side, but we do have a method for us to get, we don't have to get up to $2 million, but we can certainly get some money and take care of this situation. And if we need to get more to get us through the first 6 months, then that's what we have to do. It would be a shame not to do it. With all the work that we've taken so far in these sub-watersheds to clean things up, not just the water clarity, but the AIS situation, it would be a shame to slide backwards when we have an option to cover it. And we could correct all of that with our budgets over the next 2 years, so. Any other discussion on this? We really should have a motion on the floor. No one else wants to make it? I will. As presented. And that's the first one. Move to amend the 2025 budget for account 3-011-28G, thank you. That's the Forest, Lake and multiple partner agreement. AIS management to 110,000 and to transfer 60,000 from account 000-2900. Fund balance to account 3-011-28-G.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call.
All right, Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
So I'll make the second motion to move the amend the 2025 budget for account 3-011-22-G, which is Bone Lake AIS Management to 5,900 and to transfer $400 from the account 000-2900 fund balance to account 3-011-22-G.
I will second that motion.
Okay. Did you say a motion or motion? No, I'm sorry.
All right, Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. You didn't pick up on that, Dave. It sounded like you said second that emotion.
Second that emotion.
Exactly, a song.
Little Motown
Yeah,
there.
here we go. That was
So
our number.
I'll make a motion for number 3 also. I move to authorize the administrator on advice of council to enter into a contract with Lake Management Incorporated for treatment of curly pondweed on Forest Lake in an amount not to exceed $80,000.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Roll call, please.
All right, Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Very good. All right, thank you. Nothing else on that topic, Mike? We're all done? Okay,
No, but only related to the matter discussed, I guess I didn't see an email from my path, but we could look at maybe like a line of credit against the funds we have also, just that might be the simplest thing.
Yeah.
yeah, there are methods. Okay, very good. So who's going to take over this next one? We're here to do a fact gathering, priority gathering effort from the board, so that we have our input prior to the actual numbers going on to the budget. And, Emily, I think we'll just turn it over to you. You have some things for us.
Sure. Madam President and managers, we can go over the budget outline. It's just a reflection of the watershed management plan. And so if you would like to go by category, we can do that. I can display that. And then, I'm just ready to, one moment, please. Notes and take feedback on what the board would like to see in the budget. Otherwise, staff is definitely prepared to, gather cost estimates and put together a draft budget like we normally would each year and present that in writing at a later time.
Okay, we need some order in this, so, let's start with the administration area. I don't even know, let me ask the board, how they want to do this. We can do it like this, the section by section, or we can do it on a broader basis than this, which is just what priority areas each of us might want to spend more time on and devote more budgets to, budget money to for next year. So if you would like to do it that way, or if you want to do it the way that we just have here on the screen, which is category by category. So just speak up, tell me what you'd like to do.
Well, I think most of the time, most of our programs are pretty much set. And while there's differences from year to year, and there might be some, higher or lower emphasis, I think that's less variable than looking at what happens in the project area. So maybe we might be best advised that we spend, at least share our thoughts about what's going to happen in the project area this year. So, and that might be best be done by lake area, like you suggested, Manager Anderson.
Okay, so there's one thought. Dave, do you have something that you want to offer?
I'm open to whatever you suggest. I guess, yeah, I'd like to hear from Mr. Kinney as well as to what he would see as areas of priority for the next budget.
Well, guess that's a little bit of a loaded question, from the standpoint that, I mean, we have the format, we spent a lot of time over the years. In the development of the watershed management plan that guides the overall structure. And then the budget itself flows from that, so in trying to align with that. You know, we've looked at, a process has historically been. From that and flowing down into the budget. And then looking what's been accomplished or not been accomplished, and then as Manager Smalls has indicated also, at least in the program areas. Typically, those are not gonna change a whole lot, but we do look at trends where we're seeing more expenditures or less. The other is availability of funds. So, I mean, right now, we're trying to move in the direction of both the shoreline restoration work or protection, as well as the flood mitigation and flood resiliency piece. And those are largely gonna have to be built upon whatever dollars that we can bring in to the district, off of various partners, because. When we look at maybe where the budget, the levy was. Coming in, I guess, in 2014, it was around $800,000. And now it's 1.7 or something, that's correct. So when we think about if you were to take that 800,000 11 years ago or so and invest it. The time value of money is such that we would probably be looking at having the same amount of financial resources available today as we did then. Well, look at how much more we're doing and getting done in terms of capacity and elsewhere with the staff. So, at some point, we're also just gonna have to deal with the reality that was just discussed too about the actual, financial or fiscal state of the district and whether or not our levy is really burdensome. Or if we, pursue, we're trying to get into these other areas, but maybe at some point too, we do need to get some greater support to grant writing, whether from foundations or elsewhere, to help support that. So not really the answer, maybe Manager Bakke, that you're directly looking for, but if the board is inclined, I could certainly work on putting together some items of more specificity. But I did not come to the meeting with that necessarily in mind.
Yeah, I don't think that we need to get down to that level right now. I think, to me, what we're talking about is, what do we want to see happen next year? What is our particular as board members and the ultimate deciders of all of this, what is our priority? And it can be across the entire budget, or it can be very specific areas of the budget. That's really what I wanted this meeting to be about. And we can discuss those concepts among us. And if everybody agrees, that's great. And if they don't, then that's not something that we'll put in the budget. But something that Manager Schmalz said is always there, and that is we have our priorities set for years really ahead of time on the engineering side, working our way through the district, through all of the sub-watersheds. And so we're now at the end of that line, which is the Little Comfort and Big Comfort sub-watersheds. And just as we have in the past, we might be wrapping up something in Forest Lake, I'll just use that as the example, because it's the truth. We were wrapping up things in Forest Lake and starting projects in Little Comfort's subwatershed a few years back. So we already have a lot of Little Comfort done. There's a few more projects to do, maybe 2 or 3. One big one, I don't think there are any big ones left. But there's all this tie-up that has to happen, I think, once you get the big projects done and look at some of those next tier projects that can be done as well, to close it all up. We've worked through that process for each of our Bone Lake and Forest Lake, districts. And so then, Big Comfort, of course, has some projects that are coming along, and those are probably gonna go over the next 2 to 3 years. So that's where we're at on that side. There's not too much to add to that big stuff. So it's really about anything that each one of us think is important to include in the budget or to include going forward, not just 1 year, but going forward. So that's what I'm looking for tonight.
President Anderson, if I can
Yes.
just follow up, with what Mr. Kenny outlined is, priorities being the shoreline restoration, flood mitigation. I think we should also consider office space, being a priority as we move forward, as we've done so much discussion about that and the need for that. And just to summarize, you also added the sub-watershed projects. So I think there are 4 areas so far that I would like us to have as priorities.
Okay,
In that kind of, same kind of, the projects come out of the data, so we can't control all of that. But, so when those things pop up from the data, we need to respond to that. But aside from that, things that stand out for me is, again, the facilities. If we're gonna do a building, let's get somewhere so we have something to show for where we can go with it. Because right now, we're just kind of standing at the edge, not taking a step. Second, I think it'd be nice to have a model of this green belt, even on a small scale, or at least a design idea of what it could be. So we can start dreaming about it and start piecing together properties around that to make that come to reality. And the third one, I have in here is education, but my goodness, Adam is doing such an incredible job. Seems like he's everywhere. So I don't want to take away from that, but rather to encourage that. I think it just seems like he's doing two persons jobs. I mean, I've seen popping up in the community calendar all the time,
Right.
project things coming
Right.
through community education. I think that really helps bolster our name in the community, so even though that's out of our,
Yeah.
well, it's out of our
absolutely.
watershed, but.
Yeah, it's our own IMRA, basically.
It
yeah.
is exactly right.
But customized.
So for me, it's kind of building, greenbelt, education. That water resiliency, I think, for me, that falls in the project area.
Which one was that?
Flood mitigation.
Oh, flood mitigation, yeah.
Climate resiliency. I think that in my brain anyways, falls into the programming.
Yeah. Well.
Oh, projects, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Projects.
Also, green belt and office space, or it's not office space, open space.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of is all together, I agree.
It'd be fun to see somebody's design of what an area could be.
Yeah. Well, the only comment I have on that is that that's what EOR is working on. That's why we had them do all these detailed updates of our H&H modeling and inventory of our wetlands and forests, trees and that kind of thing. So all of that should be part of what they're doing. We just haven't seen the result of it. So we've talked about that in a couple of meetings, if you recall, and hopefully we can,
Something I want to put together for the board, when I was out in Boise for that family funeral, one of the places we walked was an area that was their kind of favorite place to do hikes. It was actually a wetland. And the paths in there, the little resting places, the memorial benches that were there, the little water areas that were backed up. I mean, if we had something like that we had our name on, a place where you just go and relax, I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah, like Florida. That was my inspiration first, some years ago, is seeing how they've handled, even with crocodiles or alligators, or whichever one they have. That was explaining how important those areas are for that state.
Mhm.
And, yeah, so I hope we can get that going.
Yeah.
Next year, I really do. And so that's another priority of mine. Thank you. Anything else?
That's all.
Okay. Steve?
I agree with what's been said so far. And I think I maybe add to some of that a little bit. I think one of the big things that is changing for the next couple of years is we've got a more cooperative and interested city council, I think, in terms of working with us. And we saw some of that at our last meeting that you had with them, Manager Anderson. So I think some of that's going to happen this year, but depending what comes out of that, I think we have to make sure we follow up. And there's a number of things here. One is, the first thing is this rules question. We have to evaluate how practical is our rules in terms of providing value for the phosphorus removal, and maybe we have to change those and trade off for something else. So that's an important thing. We also have to deal with the actual the rules that the city has for not enforcing the shoreline restoration, and we also have to do the volume control, which is part of that whole thing. So all these things have to be prioritized and pick whichever ones we can move forward with, I guess, as we move forward. The other one that I was going to mention is that it just has to do with education, and Adam has been doing a great job on education and enhancing our reputation as far as sharing information about all the work we do and some of the opportunities that are available. But we really have to, besides working on the shoreline restoration message that we have to get out, we have to start this larger program looking at, telling our story. In other words, taking credit for all the good work that we've done, building our reputation around that, getting the public more involved, especially the major public figures involved in organizations. And that also would tie in then with the office program, where you have to bring into that communication program at the same time. So I see that as a very big part of that whole education program, is the higher level storytelling that we have to do about how things were back in the 1850s, how they've changed, how we're restoring them back to where they should be, and how we protect them in the future, and the great progress that we've made in terms of not only results, but also in the cost value that we've been able to deliver for the public. That's about it right now. I think those are the major ones, and we probably have more than we can bite off if you look at the dollars involved. But how we proceed this year will determine what we probably do too, how much we get done this year. For example, we've got to look at Shields this year. We got a problem with Shields Lake. That may turn out to be a big program for next year. I don't know. So some of this stuff has to be done now, so we know we may have to change priorities next year as we get into the fall and shift dollars around depending on what the priorities are.
Or budget for additional priorities. What's happening with Shield Lake?
Well, Mike can mention this, but during the monitoring last year, we had a hot spot and we got up to 140 ratings in the lake, which is way out of control. And so something happened to boost that up, and we're now, as I understand it, could be doing some diagnostic monitoring to find out where that spike came from, what caused it, and what we can do about it. Mike, do you want to maybe comment on that, or have one of your staff comment on it, since you're closer to
Sure,
the
yeah.
medium?
Yes, so, right, if you recall in the monitoring report, so it ended up being over, well over 100 micrograms per liter. And so that with some spikes even being higher through the summer season. And at one point, Blaine had gone down and taken a singular sample at the culvert coming in from the west side down through that neighborhood. And that was 350 or something micrograms per liter. We don't have a flow, so we can't necessarily calculate the load per se. But just the fact that that level of concentration is extremely high. If our outside the boundaries of what we had measured in the past, so we don't know where that's coming from. And so we've instituted based off of that report, and the first thing is we've staff led DIY diagnostic monitoring with the hopes that it would tell us, at least in some sub watershed component of that drainage area, where we're seeing the highest amounts, and then take some other samples and send them to the lab for validation, and then do further investigation from there to see what other project might be necessary, or if there's just simply a source, what it is, because at this point, it definitely caught us by surprise. You know, did not show up in the signature of past sampling, so we don't know where it's coming from.
Was that a one-time thing, or was that throughout the spring?
And it was during the summer when we had the rainy periods. I think it was a July sample, in fact, so not that first flush where you would expect a higher number typically anyway. And but just the fact that our summer sampling was so high.
Did it continue to be that high?
Yes,
Okay,
the in-lake sampling was continued to be that high.
there's nothing new on the landscape? Not a development upstream from that?
No, I mean, the Chestnut Creek has been in for quite some
Mhm.
years, and actually that development with the stormwater ponds, et cetera, is in theory better than the clean tilled agricultural field that was there. So along with us renting the other field and putting it to permanent cover. So there's not anything that we can observe on the landscape that is sticking out, but
Oh,
and whether or not it's. Cause there's a whole drainage area to the south that's more agriculture. And whether or not there is some new activity there, or maybe somebody spread a bunch of manure and then they got run off, or, washed in or something like that, and was unaware of, or.
south of Shields?
Well, south of that neighborhood area, but
Okay.
it's basically southwest of Shields Lake itself, so.
But it would still drain into?
Correct, it's this area
Oh,
out
I
here.
see, sure.
I'm pointing to the southwest of the lake. And so, but we're looking at, I mean, other than some additional sampling, I don't think we'd be prepared for a project next year.
Takes longer to diagnose
Diagnostic,
it,
right?
yeah.
Is there the possibility of sampling further up from where those samples were taken, or is it all underground at that point?
No, we have a pretty extensive, network of sampling that the staff is doing on the DIY side, so trying to close in as quickly as possible. We don't want this to, go any longer than possible, because of its impact on the alum treatment itself within the
Oh,
lake.
yeah.
But, that was already 6 years ago, so time has gone by, but.
And the golf course didn't do anything unusual?
We're not seeing anything, and they've been great stewards in terms of,
That's what I thought.
complying with the,
Okay,
and actually the sampling point would not be downstream of the golf course, it'd be. It comes in from a different
okay,
area, so that's more the neighborhood.
okay,
Maybe just a driving range was the only thing that would maybe come into
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
A smaller area.
Wow. That's crazy, crazy. But is EOR, our engineers, are they involved in this?
Yeah,
To
so,
help us? Good,
yeah,
good.
Dr. Wilkinson and Blaine collaborated on those points.
Yeah, we want to get them in early so that we can have two entities dealing with it and figure it out. You haven't seen any additional spikes like that though, right? This past year?
On that location or
Yeah,
elsewhere?
No, that location.
No, we only took the one sample, cause we're really expecting it, right? So that was, and then it takes some amount of time for the lab, and then it dried up into the fall. So there just wasn't opportunities to take more samples that were of value.
Are the carp coming back to Shields?
We're not seeing them, there's no
Okay, well,
indication,
that's good. It's too small to have boat issues, so,
there's no boats on it. so.
yeah, exactly.
Hey, Mike, maybe
Okay.
it's all the carp that snuck in in Forest Lake this spring.
There you go.
Maybe they worked their way up past the,
That barrier is in good working condition.
all right. You
I
said
left
that,
there-
you said that about the dike too,
Yeah,
the fish-proof railing there, right? So,
Nope, I did not say that, so that was. That. That was.
most they
that
hauled,
was-
they, thank God we stopped most of, they hauled a whole truckload out of there, so we got rid of a lot of
Right.
carp out of Comfort Lake anyway.
Right, yes, yeah.
Say, one of the things we might want to talk about is, a lot depends on what we get done this year. So, Shields Lake, we're going to do some work this year on that. There's other things that we're expecting to move forward on, and if we get ahead of schedule or not ahead of schedule, that might determine, what happens next year. So obviously the flood mitigation effort with the city is going to tell us a lot this year. So we need to kind of forecast where we're going to be at the end of the year and how that's going to impact what we're going to need next year. So,
Well-
we'll have to, maybe we want to talk a little bit about that.
yeah, but I think our budget for this year should cover what we had planned for this year.
Right, okay.
Is there anything that's taking that off course,
Not that I
except for
can,
this last thing that we just dealt with here tonight? I mean, there's nothing major that we have to deal with. Correct?
no, we have our grants for like the. Heath Avenue iron sand filter, and that'll likely be a 2026 construction anyway,
Mhm.
but,
What about the rules decision? We should have results back on the rules and how effective they are and so forth on the cost value. Will that be done by the end of the year?
To be determined yet, so I was in on the call with the lead researcher on that, and he and I are both, trying to bring some other people into the conversation. Because we quickly realized it's probably more complicated than we initially thought, but also they did see value in pursuing this, and just for the rest of the board, so it was something that the city of Forest Lake, the administrator and the mayor brought up to President Anderson and myself, but it's something that of interest to me for some number of years. And I've kind of asked around, no one had done this work in terms of evaluating cost benefit of the rules, and particularly the thing that I was trying to quantify or get an understanding of the benefit of the erosion sediment control component. So just that alone, like how much sediment and then associated nutrients have been saved from aggregating a large data set of permits,
I've been asking that question for 15 years at least. And the only place that I found any kind of interest in doing that was the research department at the University of Minnesota. I met them at that fall conference that the U of M puts on water. And they were all about it, because that's what they look for, is those types of projects for their master's degree students, so.
Right,
So,
so the St.
that's good to
Anthony
hear.
Falls, yeah, St.
That's good
Anthony
to hear.
Falls is, the stormwater research group is.
Yeah.
Expressed some interest in it. But.
We have to know that. I mean, honestly, we really need to quantify that. But I firmly believe that had we not been doing the rules and enforcing the rules the way that we did, we would not be at these enormously unusual results like we have in a short period of time.
No, there's a lot of evidence, I mean, and certainly when I was on the call with Andy Erickson. you know, we both started our careers when there were no rules for most municipalities, and there were, I mean, both had horror stories about, you know, huge washouts and gullies and just dump truck loads of sediment being moved off location. So, so we know that, and you know, and then also, you know, indirectly, we can look at the work that the St. Clair Watershed Research Station did on Forest Lake and those 3 core samples, and we see, you know, after the logging and then farming and things like that, there was starting to see a dip in the sedimentation rate. And then over the last 30 years, it's increased, and it's been a steady increase. And that was largely from the 80 through the more last decade. The only explanation you would really have, no, is construction,
Construction, oh,
unregulated construction.
wow.
So until the
Yeah.
district had rules,
Mhm.
we started to slow some of that down. Because, you know, that was, I mean, you can imagine most of the construction around the lake occurred with no sediment control, right? So all the whatever number of decades,
Mhm.
so that it did an increase, so. Along with putting in more pipe that drains more of the surrounding area, and there's, you know, we now have the MS4 in place, there's all these building components that. And you know, what we've talked to the, you know, city mayor and administrator about was building a sustainable system. And so that's the objective too with the St. Anthony Falls Research Lab, and the Stormwater Research Council, and saying,
Mhm.
you know, at what point does then, are we better off taking the money though, when. Cause it's very feasible that we're maybe, somebody is offering to. Cause the way the rules work is, a developer with their engineer presents something and we just review it. We don't try to guide them or tell them. We'll offer feedback, but we don't ever, from a starting point, they present us with whatever they're going to do. And then the district reviews it and says, okay, that meets, you know, the rules or not. So, but some things may be, you know, far beyond what. You know, we try to stay away from projects that are roughly greater than $1,000 a pound of phosphorus, for example. And you know, give or take some amount, but it's possible that through some of the permitting, the reductions are, you know, maybe such that the cost is higher. The additional unknown though is what's the additional storage and volume control value. Again, things that haven't been done, so. In part of this conversation with them is that we agreed that we should try to pull in more metro watershed districts. And because it's gonna require somebody doing some work, and somebody's gonna come up with some funding to do it, so. You know, hopefully will be a source, no different than the Wakefield research that was done.
Right,
But it's legitimate, and a lot of the rules work done around 2010 to 2011, 12 were all under the minimal impact design standards. These were additional things, and that was done through this big group of cities, counties, watershed districts, but also home builders associations, and, you know, developers, that side of it as well, to come together and, you know, to agree on something that was acceptable. So I think that could be another format for getting this addressed. So to finally answer your question, Manager Schmaltz, I don't think it'll be done by the end of the year.
So then we should probably budget some money or whatever we might have for next year. A couple other thoughts just came to mind. We should probably, who's going to capture these ideas, or maybe we should all send our ideas in so we have a record of it. Because what we don't want to happen is at the end of August, we have like 8 or 9 new ideas submitted. And then we have to go through a lot of extra work like we did last year and the year before.
well, that's the point of doing this beforehand.
Right.
That's the point of this, so that we
Right.
don't have to go through all those iterations. And it's done up front, so everybody's input is captured so that we can avoid situations like that.
Right.
We're doing it first.
So I had a couple other suggestions. One is the pizza pub looks like it might be moving forward. So that is not going to be a 6-month program. So we need to look at budgeting money for that next year, assuming we go ahead. The other thing is that we're talking about increased interest in sediment, and one of the big data points we need to get about sediment is the loss of shoreline over time. You and I, Mike, have talked about doing this. There's survey work available to easily do a sample of 20 or 30 homes and by different, east, west, north, and see what kind of the shorelines are by prevailing winds and so forth lost. So that's something else we should probably budget for. We might even do something this year if we have some money left. I don't know. It's probably not, maybe a summer student could even do it for us. It's a kind of a project that could be done in the summer, I suspect. It's just a matter of going out and seeing where the stakes are and measuring how much has been lost. But you got to get permission from the landowners too, of course. But so those are two other thoughts I have. So
Shoreline erosion, though, is due to primarily not having trees, bushes, and native plants on the shoreline. What's going
Can I
on?
pause you for just a second? Are you able to find the mute button? Not your mute button, but the volume X button.
Yes, it's
Is it off?
okay, I'll just have to. Right.
Okay.
Just didn't want to turn my head all the time, that's awesome. I'm trying to,
Is that better?
I don't know what's going on with my audio, I've got it all muted, but it's still obviously giving me some issues. So Manager Small, you're not the only one with that kind of issue at times.
Can you explain the pizza pub place, Mike, and from the beginning, but they've done some, I'll show you the picture, I've got one on my phone. They've done some eradication of all of the plants on their shoreline. And and they were working on, with the digger in the water,
a mini backhoe.
so.
well, I thought we had decided we were going to invite the DNR manager, local managers to come in on that and start working up the chain of command. So that's something else we have to get at this year, but that may carry over to next year because we need to get the DNR to give us give people support when they've got a lake that's in disaster from a shoreline, not a loss of a natural shoreline. They just can't be.
Well, that was my
business as
thought.
normal. Right.
That was my thought that I sent back to the staff here. And the reality is that Chuck is involved to see the best way to handle this before we jump into a pool with no water. We wanted to make sure that we understand. One of the things I found too is Bowser has a great deal of authority in assisting local watersheds and local government units when things go awry. And so we wanted Chuck to look at that aspect as well. And if we can get Bowser, our agency, to work with the DNR on what seems to us to be a real problem. The DNR has been promoting natural shorelines for quite some time now. They've spent a lot of time and energy on it. And this was a permit by the DNR granting the pizza pub the authority to do what they did. And so when we saw it happening, so our staff did, Mike Sandiger, he called and tried to get the DNR to come out. It took him a while, almost 2 weeks, week and a half at least, to come out and take a look at what was happening. By that time, everything was naked. The shoreline was naked and they were digging into the water to supposedly put rocks there to stop the erosion. So.
They're also going to add sand.
And they were, to make a beach.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's pretty nasty.
So
But anyway, let me get to my points. A lot of them have been made already. But the ones that really were on my top priority list was getting our general fund balance actually in a good shape. Our net position on the annual audit shows us at a negative 1.9 million. And so we have to write that as well, and that means that we're going to have to figure out what we're going to be including every year in our tax planning to write those situations. We just can't keep operating like that. We had a year, 3 or 4 years ago, when we had to pay for at least half, maybe a little more than that. I think I calculated 60% actually of the Highway 61 project. It was one of those goofy situations where it took about 5 years, because there was COVID that happened, I recall, and, the family, that owned that farm, there were delays. First, there were delays because of rain. I know there was big rain events, and so we kind of moved things out to the end of that, first, big, grant that we got. But by that time, prices had gone up, and so it's just this kind of snowball effect of different things that happened right with that project. Mike, you can fill in more of the details, but bottom line is we had to take more money out of our levy to pay for that project than we had anticipated. But you remember me talking about the way that we started doing budgeting was that when we reached this next big level of expenditure, primarily identified by each of the sub-watersheds, then the taxes would go up more than usual, and they would stay constant at that level for a number of years. We tried to make it 5 if we could. And then when we moved to the next set of big projects, the next sub-watershed, we would raise that up again for what we needed, because inflation takes care of a lot of that, or erodes part of that. And so that's really how we did it. And you remember the budget discussions last year. You know, I wanted to go up more, primarily because of my concern about this general fund balance at the end of the year not being what we needed for the next 6 months. And we've been getting by because we start some of our capital project grants that we get so much money up front, and that's usually some of the preliminary work, of course, the engineering work, and so we can retrieve some of that money as those steps get completed. But if something gets delayed, you can't rely on that on a consistent basis, which is what you need to cover our operations expense, which is primarily overhead and wages. So I always want to see at least half of that year of money that we need for that alone in our general fund when we leave the or end the year. So those two are my really big top priorities from a financial standpoint. And you mentioned earlier, Emily, that Red Path with our new CPA supervisor is working on getting a handle on all of those things that might have not been as transparent in the past, so that we have a better idea of these things, right?
Yeah.
What I heard? Yes, okay, very good. Very good. I want to hear from you next, if the board is done. I'm almost done here. The non-point source pollution areas, I think there's 4 of them. We've had that from the very beginning, thinking that we could stimulate activity with the public, you know, from residential on up to commercial. And that really hasn't worked like we wanted it to. And so those budget dollars, I think it's over 100,000 that usually sits in that fund and doesn't get used. So I would like to see that one not be there. There's other ways that I think we can work with people because it's not doing anything for us. So either we create something new in the package that we have already for shorelines, residential shorelines, put more money into that, or use it in a different way. So just not in this. We shouldn't be budgeting for something that's not working. So that would be something that I would like to see. The rest of these items, like I said, office space, the green belt and open space, of course, that's kind of a continuing project. But we need to get EOR to get what you were talking about is, you know, have a vision of it. When they do their mapping, they're the ones with the knowledge of all this stuff. When they map that out, then we should have that, you know, that should be accomplished. So we need to, you know, light some fires to make sure that they know how important that is. And that first step just needs to happen. Education, I agree with you. I think Adam's doing a great job, but, you know, we'll have to assess if we need to do more on that because it is so effective, how we might be able to, you know, arrange that. We need to talk to him about that. The rules review, I agree that that needs to be done. But we have to, I think, really be careful on that too, because they've been so successful. And the rules did not stop anyone from doing what they needed to do in the past. There've been, as far as I know, there've been some slight grumbling. I only know of 2 sources that grumbled about these. There might be more, but they weren't upset with it enough to bring it out into the open. But I think, you know, we need to remember on the rules, especially that that's our job. Our job is to make sure that the water is protected. And if a developer or anybody else that's working with a land change issue needs to work with the district from the very beginning. And the district's job is not just to see if they're meeting our rules, but to also, if there's some water program or asset that you can put on that project, that needs to be discussed with those folks as well. Not at their expense, but at ours, the way we used to do it. And we never have had issues with that in the past. So I think if we just sort of reframe ourselves that if there's something missing from that plat that comes in that would benefit the water, then that needs to be brought to the board. And those situations need to be handled. Now, sometimes the people will agree with it right off the bat, but if there's something that's really important for the water and it's being held up, then somehow the board needs to be involved in that process. We used to do reviews like that on particular ones. It's not a lot, doesn't happen a lot, but when it happens, it's usually a stickier situation and we just need time to see what's happening and make sure that we don't end up with a public relations nightmare. So there are ways that we can work around those issues, in my opinion. The marketing and PR, 100% agree what Manager Schmaltz said. We've been talking about that for years. We've got a company and they need to be funded so that they can do the work that we require out of them. Shields Lake problem, I didn't know about that one until tonight, so obviously that's just part of our duty. You know, and if that's gonna be a problem, if that's gonna be a program or a project that requires money, then we need to start looking at grants and we need to start, you know, doing that kind of thing. But if we have enough cushion in our budget, this doesn't seem like it's gonna be a massive project like some of our $1 million projects. But if it's, you know, 40,000, 50,000 or so, we should be able to handle those types of things. We do have an adaptive management philosophy and we need to use that when something comes up that's not exactly budgeted. Okay, I think I've hit everything for me. Okay, Emily, can you update us on where we're at with grants for the end of this year and maybe even some of the ones that we need to start thinking about? Because I think the ones for the next year happen in early fall, don't they? September, October?
Yep.
Okay.
Sure. I can go through, you know, we've got a long list of active grants. I can give a summary of each one, kind of focusing on the ones for this year and then looking ahead to next year. There's also a number of other critical budget areas that I would recommend the board consider. So maybe, you know, if there's time, I could go through that afterward if you would like.
Yeah, absolutely, everything. That's what this is about. Get it all out on the table.
Okay, well, I'll just kind of do a run through of our active grants that, some of which we'll be spending this year and some will span multiple years. So first up, we have the Washington Judicial Ditch 6 wetland restoration. We closed out that construction project last year. We're implementing the signage this year. And so we're able to use grant funds to pay for that signage, provided we get it done, installed, paid for, everything by the end of this year, because that's when that grant expires. So we need those signage designs are coming to the board in this next board packet. And so trying to keep momentum on that and make sure we get those installed and paid for by the grant. Same goes for the Moody Capstone project. We closed out the main construction contract for that project at the end of last year. Separately, working with a landowner just north of the lake, we're implementing some agricultural BMPs this year, and then also doing the project signage. So that's getting paid for by the grant this year, and then staff time, it's going for the match. Another big grant that we have in 2025 is obviously the second half of the Forest Lake alum treatment. That's going to be a big grant expenditure, and we'll process that funding revenue and earned revenue as fast as we can. We're slated to come in a little under budget on this one, but we'll be able to still spend as much of the grant as we can and provide that minimum match and get that project done as designed.
How much is that? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Yeah, the second half of the alum treatment is about 297,000. The first half was like 236,000. So it's going up a little bit because we're increasing that dosage using the information we collected last year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Another grant we have is a DNR grant for the North Shore Circle City Park shoreline restoration. I believe that contract, Aiden's been working on that. I think that contract is coming forward to this next board meeting or perhaps the next one, but yeah, getting that shoreline restoration in place on the city park, and it'll be a really great demonstration site, and that is funded by a DNR grant. A minor one that we just concluded at the first half of this year was we got a grant from the Lower St. Croix watershed-based implementation funding for the Heath Avenue Iron Enhanced feasibility study. So we were able to pay for the majority of that feasibility study with that grant. That was really critical to us getting the $1.5 million grant, Clean Water Fund competitive grant, which is the biggest award from that program I think ever. I looked at the past, and other ones were like just over $1 million. So a pretty big grant award from that competitive grant. And so
Yeah,
finishing
I
off
agree.
that.
And just before you go on, the Heath Avenue other grant was from what source?
The Lower St. Croix watershed-based funding.
And how much was that?
That was about 47,000.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so then, yeah, that grant is going to be over and closed out. And now we have executed the grant for the implementation. And so that'll cover the project design, which EOR is actively working on. We just closed on that property, which was not funded by a grant, but funded with local funds and financed with the Clean Water Partnership loan. So we have purchased that part of the property on which the project will go, and we are full steam ahead going forward with that project. Another multi-year initiative, and this is one where we don't actually see the funds coming through on the budget, but we're working with a partner in Great River Greening, and they got a grant, and they are contracting and paying for the work for vegetation restoration at the North Shore Trail Nature Area north of Forest Lake. So we don't see those revenues here, but that's work that's getting paid for by a grant and through a partnership. Closing out, just submitted the final reporting for our Bowser PRAP grant. We got $10,000 to pay for the Cultivate Advisors efforts for strategic planning. So that deposit should be coming in any day now. And then another active grant, we are playing for the Flood Resiliency Action Plan that EOR is working on. We got a local climate action grant from the Pollution Control Agency to pay for that effort. And it also helped pay for, EOR's involvement in the community engagement and things like that. And then we have applied for, after we finish the Flood Resiliency Action Plan, we have applied for another grant to take us into that next phase, which is the project concept design and the modeling for those individual practices. And so just continuing that project hopper process. And so we will learn the award for that other grant. That one was through Bowser, a water quality and storage grant, in the next month or so. So keeping our fingers crossed on that one. Mike had mentioned, so our Green Corps contract is finishing up this year. That had provided us 1 FTE over the course of last fall. And then Julia will be funded through, I believe, this July. Yeah, it's unfortunate that the program is being canceled, but hopefully we can find a way to, work out if Julia were able to join us. I think that's part of the conversation and, something Mike is looking into. Continuing down our list of projects that have grants. So there is the School Lake Agricultural BMPs, just north of School Lake off July Avenue. There is a feedlot, and so installing practices to basically treat that manure runoff from the feedlot, as well as some cropland practices in that ag field as well. So we will be, I don't think we'll be closing that out this year. It'll roll into next year, but we'll have some revenues, some earned revenues from that this year, and probably close out that project next year.
What's the farm? Who owns the farm?
The landowner's name is Waddell, I believe.
Waddell?
Yes.
Waddell, Wedell? Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Thanks.
We get 3 recurring annual grants through the Washington County AIS Prevention Aid Program. And so Mike Sandiger and Matthew and Tori have been kind of arranging for those. And so, those are some that we request, what we request, but the allocations are getting lower and lower each year. And I think there is some uncertainty with the continuation of the General County AIS Prevention Aid Program. But we got about 20,000 worth of grant awards for 2025. And we'll apply again in 2026, and hopefully we can continue funding some of our AIS work with those. And then from the Chisago County AIS Prevention Aid, that's another one where it doesn't really come in as a revenue, but through our joint powers agreement with Chisago County, we implement that watercraft inspection program. The county basically deducts $5,000 worth of inspections by their inspectors at our lakes. So Comfort Lake, Forest Lake, Bone Lake. So it's not a revenue on the books, but we're getting that service and partaking in those AIS prevention aid dollars from both counties. A new program that we've recently gotten, so it's the Minnesota Glacial Lakes Partnership, or MGLP. We were awarded $60,000. And so that is going towards shoreline restorations and shoreline outreach. Working closely with Aiden and Adam to track expenses on that, and that'll supplement our shoreline outreach and shoreline restoration program. And we've got a few projects earmarked right now to be directly funded by that grant, and making sure it's meeting all the eligibility and everything. And that's a federal grant, so there's a bit more paperwork for that, but we're working through it and to be able to spend that grant over the course of this year and next year.
Yeah, if it doesn't go. I said, if it doesn't go away.
Yes, and I have spoken with our contacts, and awarded federal grants is secured. I do not expect that 60,000 will be taken away from us. We can feel reasonably assured that grant award will stay. Whether it'll be offered again and we can keep going back to that fund is a lot more uncertain. Yeah, that's a good point. I mentioned the Heath Avenue Clean Water Fund Competitive Grant. That was one of 2 awards we got in just these past few months from that. The other one is for the Sunrise River Headwaters Project Development. So got $118,000, and that'll fund EOR's efforts of kind of taking another look at that Sunrise River corridor and the general headwaters and Little Comfort Lake, and just making sure we are identifying practices so that we can achieve those nutrient load reduction goals, phosphorus and sediment, and maintain that good water quality that we've been seeing in those lakes. Another kind of new program. So Bowser offered for the first time a green infrastructure projects, and it was kind of packaged with this other one, the Clean Water Legacy Partners. The Clean Water Legacy Partners is only available to non-government organizations and tribal governments. So what watershed districts cannot apply to that. But they offered this kind of separate program, which we were one of 2 watershed districts that were awarded. It was us in South Washington that received awards for this. And that was the $225,000 for the Goodwin Avenue Stormwater Wetland, which is just upstream of Comfort Lake. So working on that, should have the grant agreement executed pretty soon here, and working on project design this year, and that'll roll into next year. And then along with that one, another, 2 days apart, we received word of these 2 awards. We got another, separate from our other one, we've received now 2 MPCA local climate action grants. And now this one is specifically for shoreline resiliency planning. So it'll dovetail with that PR work, so long as, the outcome has to be resiliency related. And so tying it back to how natural shorelines create more resilient shorelines in the face of climate change and wave action and extra precipitation. And so coming up with a targeted plan to increase adoption of natural shoreline buffers, and that'll increase shoreline resiliency. So we'll be working on that one and making sure we're getting to that final deliverable using the PR firm.
How much is that worth?
That one is $35,000, and $25,000 is for the consultant, and $10,000 goes to staff time, such as Aiden and Adam's time. And, the 2 big ones, the really big budget amendment that we could yet see this year is the Bone Lake South Wetland. That we've been working for a long time with the landowner. We are really hopeful that we're kind of getting to a place where we can have an executed purchase agreement this spring. And so kind of getting all of our ducks in a row, and going to need to do a survey. There's a lot of, hoops you need to jump through with the grant. The DNR has to review the appraisal and everything. But things are lining up, and we could, pay for that acquisition. We got 2 grants for this one. So $1.9 million from the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Fund, and then another $500,000 for the Bone Lakes, or for the Conservation Partners Legacy. So hopefully getting through to that one, and might spend that up this year.
Where is the Conservation Legacy from? Is that DNR?
Yeah, and it's actually a sub-program of Lessard Sam's. So they're both ultimately the same source, but CP Conservation Partners Legacy is a pass-through allocation of Lessard Sam's to the DNR for smaller budgets under $500,000.
So that sounds like a perfect grant for our open space and greenbelt initiatives when we get there, because that's what that's all about, is, finding these natural open spaces that aren't disturbed, and using them for flood holding and water storage, so that we can protect our rivers and lakes. So that's good. Hopefully that one's still going next year. Well, actually, this comes off of our own state money, doesn't it?
Sure.
Yeah, so it's safe. Good. Wonderful.
I think so.
The Lessard Sam's is more as, because everyone knows, focused on habitat.
Oh, well, that one too then.
Right, so
Mhm.
the other water quality, those are all secondary benefits, we
Mhm.
can measure, but just so the board knows that it's. You know, they need to be
We'll,
strong,
we'll be using the door that's open to us.
yes.
Okay,
Right.
very good. We don't have to hammer it down. That's what I.
Emily, if I
That's
can jump in here for just a second. I think this is a really impressive list of grants that you've listed off for us. Is it possible that you could send us just a summary? I mean, just the name of the grant and the amount. I think this is worthy of sharing with our colleagues throughout our watershed as to what what you're doing and the grants that we're getting and how this money is being used. I don't think many people are really aware out there of what's going on. And I would like to be able to say, hey, take a look. Yes, your tax dollars are being spent wisely, but we're also getting grant money to support this work. And I think a lot of people they just don't have a clue. They see that, Chisago School District is trying to raise over $60 million to take care of their facilities, and people are just really upset about taxes. But if we can provide information that shows we're looking at grant money and we're using grant money as well, I think it'll just support our work even more.
Oh, absolutely.
Steve, you're muted.
Yeah, Dave, that's in our budget sheets, one of the last pages. All the history of the grants are in there for 3 or 4 years. So you just look at the last page, it would have it for 2025 and 2024. But it could be
I can do an
simplified.
updated one.
Yeah, if it can be simplified, Emily,
Yeah.
just if I could have it on one page that I can walk to the Bone Lake Association with and just say, hey, here's something you need to look at.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, Madam President, managers, yeah, that's what I was thinking, is more just taking it out and separating, putting it as a PDF. That you could share them with other people, because people don't necessarily they'll get lost in our budget if they try to find that page.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it also allows us to do more projects more quickly than we would have been able to. Instead of getting this done in 50 or 60 years, we're looking at 30 years, so. Well, not for all the things that we talked about for climate and all that, but I'm talking about the major projects for our 4 sub-watersheds. That's primarily what I'm talking about. But we are still being able to get grants. That means that we can do this next step, which is the climate resiliency stuff. And under that, of course, is where flooding and, open spaces and greenbelt all belong. So, yeah, so that's a big initiative. It's gonna take longer, but and it's not necessary for the clean water now, but it will be in the future. Yes.
Madam President, managers, we already spoke about having a new firm to assist the district with the public, more on the shoreline piece, but and I know that managers have spoken about telling our story. Well, one, compelling story is the fact that we've been the #1 grant recipient
Yes.
in water funds for 10 years or 11 years in a row now, plus all the other ones that, Andrew Baki's taking note of and wanting to share. That part of that story can be maybe, the thing up front that we communicate in a lot of different areas. We haven't really done that. We just had our lake associations, but we really did not, meetings, and we did not speak to the audience about how much that we have brought in, because they'll see on their tax statement what their levy is, but they don't see a corresponding amount of grants that have come in and be able to leverage and get so much done. And, make the improvements to the respective water resources that have been done in the last 12 years or so.
Well, and even beyond that, the other thing too is that they've got to understand that when it looked like we weren't doing anything, we were, there were projects that came along, but, those first 12 years, we're really getting the data in that we needed. And that data is what cements our superior ability to get grants, because they want the technical information, and hardly any watershed does that. I mean, we're talking a small percentage. of our 46 watersheds, there's maybe 10 or 12 that do it. And everyone does it in, different ways, but anyway, so, we've been collecting this data for a very, very long time, and the grant givers really appreciate that because they can see, what the situation was, and through our continual monitoring, how the waters are sustaining that level and what we're doing to sustain that. And, yeah, there's a lot to be said for understanding that you have to do the work first before you can do the projects and then get the grants and all of that. So the whole story is important for the public to understand because it really does kind of look like you're not getting a lot done when you're doing those big foundational types of data collection.
Well, and this is really a timely issue because everybody's writing those checks to pay their May 15th property taxes. So
Yeah,
this comes up in conversation and people complain about it. And it's
Mhm.
something that they need to be aware of, that, how efficiently and effectively we're using the dollars and grant dollars.
yeah. Yes,
Madam President, maybe we could ask Adam, I think he gets his weekly Lake Association thing out
mhm.
soon, right? First part, I don't think it's gone out yet, has
I
it?
don't think it's gone out yet.
So maybe we could get that PDF and then have that go out to the lake associations. Just as a part of letting everybody know we're starting the budget discussion process.
I wonder if that chart would be.
I have a question, Manager Anderson. Yes.
Yes, go ahead. Go
Um,
ahead.
when will our final financials be done for 2025? I mean, 2024, I'm sorry. The audit is finished now, right? So we should get a final budget sheet of what the, what all the numbers look like. So I'd like to have that as treasurer.
Yeah, Bonnie's still working on that final spreadsheet to make it look like
Mhm.
our system. But she said she should get that to us pretty soon. I was told she was gonna get it to me the other day, so
Good.
I expect it
Okay,
in the next few days.
good. Make sure all the managers get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's following Emily's format then? Is that correct?
So she's following Emily, do you wanna take this? I feel like I'm not great at responding to that.
Yeah, the budget format, the watershed management plan format, it'll be in those terms of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 and provide the detail,
Okay.
like the treasurer's report.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Can you let me know when they're available then, Tori, if you would, please? Thank you.
Yep, I'll get it out to everyone.
Say one
We
other
should-
comment I think I want to make. One of the things we're going to come up against is because we've got so many things we want to do next year. We're probably not going to have enough money, and of course, unless we raise the levy significantly, but that may or may not happen. But so we should be in a position to have costs in all these different areas that we're interested in. So if we have to pull something out and maybe put it on the back burner, we know how much to pull out and so forth, just so we understand that. So you normally have that information, Emily, but I just want to make sure we do have it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that, that is probably a good segue into the next topic of, some other potential budget priorities that the board might want to consider. That's, I finished the grant summary. That is the active grants that we have awarded. We're actively working on a bunch more grants. We've got 2 that were recently submitted and are pending award decision. And we've got another 2 kind of big ones coming to the regular board meeting this Thursday to the Lethard Dam. So continuation of the Bone Lake South work, that actual restoration work. And then, the Greenbelt initiative. So, actively applying for more grants. The grants are kind of the more exciting thing, the projects and those initiatives, but there are some other, budget requirements that are worth mentioning. Some things that are core and critical and are often things that are mandated for the watershed district to do, and therefore there aren't a lot of grants for these. And so they really need to be, have their place with the levy. And so putting this into context a little bit, The 2025 levy was just over 1.8 million. So if we were to increase that, you know, in the realm of 1.8 or 1.9 million, just as a frame of reference. I want to list a few items that are kind of those core critical tasks, and then I can speak about each one a little bit more if you'd like. There is the loan repayment. The district, I'll list them first and I can give details. The loan repayment, staff wages and benefits, the administrative series, board administration, general office, general district administration, and professional services. There is the permit, engineering, and legal review, the stuff that is covered by the levy. And then there's project operations and maintenance. So given a little bit more detail on each one, the loan repayment, the district is currently carrying about $4 million worth of debt right now over the course of 4 different Clean Water Partnership grants. The past 3 years, we have levied for more dollars than the loan repayment was and built up a loan savings, essentially. It's a dedicated fund. It's kind of part of that fund balance. It's, of the money in the bank, 400,000 is set aside for loan repayments. And so that can be kind of metered out over time. But there still is, the loan repayments themselves. In 2025, it'll be just over 500,000 in that year. So only working the numbers and using some of it as our levy and some of that loan savings and making sure that we're making payments on those loans. The staff wages and benefits. The 2025 budget for this was 1.2 million. So I want to definitely look at that, and, looking at the workload analysis and what is needed to forward all of this work and get some estimates for staff wages and benefits. The administration series, the per diems and the IT and the office equipment and office rent and everything. And there's a lot to unpack there. And, we could certainly spend a fair amount of time in a budget workshop just going through that. But, that's in the realm of about 300,000 just for administration and overhead. Probably for permit engineering and legal, this is really demand-based each year based on how many applications come in. We try as much as we can to track, permit costs against the permit deposits. So if a developer applies for a permit, they pay a deposit and the district tracks expenses against that deposit. And so that permittee is essentially paying for all of the EOR and the Smith partners and the staff time that it takes to implement that permit. Now, people that are exempt from that permit deposit are government agencies. So if a city is doing a road project and they need to get a permit for us, the watershed district has to pay for all of that review time. And sometimes those are sizable projects. So we need to make sure that we're setting aside enough funds to cover that permit review that's for exempt agencies. And finally, just noting the project operations and maintenance, we have put in obviously a quite expansive portfolio of projects in the ground over the years, and they've been funded by grants. The thing that the grants do not fund is the operations and maintenance of those. And so a lot of that is covered by the staff time already, so that, staff wages and benefits I already mentioned, we can accomplish a lot there. But, we need to pay for EOR time that goes toward operations and maintenance, and as well as any direct maintenance costs. And so there are a few kind of regular costs and just the operational things of like the boats and the vehicle and everything like that, which are relatively small and recurring. But there are some, if you need to replace the iron enhanced sand filter media in one of those projects, that could be a sizable cost. So definitely want to be planning ahead for those and monitoring the projects to see if any big media replacement or other big maintenance task is necessary. So we're tracking that really closely. And that is my summary. So those kind of core critical things could reach about 2 million in and of themselves. And so I think this is something that staff can prepare in greater detail when we look at the draft budget, and just look at sources of revenue and expenditures and, just recommending that as we are looking at expenditures for the next year, kind of considering how, how those factor into the priorities. They're not as flashy or exciting, but they're really critical to do, and they could have sizable costs.
Well, if that wasn't clear before, thank you for doing this detail, but that's something that has to be taken care of. I mean, that's what I was talking about before, is that these are things that we have to make sure are covered. And having the number, that when you do your preliminary budget for us to look at, you're going to be including all of those increases that should go into those areas. So when we get that first preliminary budget, hopefully those things will be included. So yes, we should have, I usually use 10%. Because not only is the wage going up, but also the benefits will go up. Taxes might go up as well, and so that pretty much wraps up, what an annual increase might look like. And then there might be some areas that, you can't predict. So you've got more staff time or, some other expense in there that doesn't really fit, but with the budget, or wasn't part of the budget. So yeah, I think that's a good idea. Thank you for giving the detail. One thing I wanted to note also, though, if you could break out those dedicated funds in that administrative area with their own, I know they all have their own chart of accounts number. And so if you could put those in, including the reserve fund. So that's something that hasn't been real clear in the past either. So we do have a number. I see it on all these transfer sheets that come in to move the budget around as we need to during the year. And that's great. But make sure that number is on there too. That way we can keep track of anything that's rolling over from the prior year. And it'll be easier, I think, to work with that when we see it and know it.
Can do.
We might even want to, once that's done, is have it as a sub number underneath the big savings account. Because you're right, that $2 million that sits in there is not all available to us. And if we can just identify it, by, I think there's 4 dedicated funds: the general fund, the implementation project fund, and there's the funds for, well, we're gonna get rid of those separate funds that we talked about earlier, on the non-point source pollution areas. We're not gonna do those, hopefully next year. They're gonna be not part of the budget. And if there's dedicated funds there, we're gonna have to, move them into the general fund as a board. So we can get down to that, but if we can just see that granular nature of our chart of accounts, that would be helpful.
Yeah, dedicated funds being unearned grant revenues and, which line by line that is, and then the stormwater impact fund and the permit escrow, those kind of dedicated funds that's what you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I've been working with Redpath on, and we'll get that in front of you in the next treasurer's report, and if not sooner, when we meet for the next budget workshop.
Yeah, that's fine. Great. Emily, the other thing, I don't know how early you can maybe do this, but sometime during the summer when we're still working on the budget, I don't know when the list of funds that are grants that are available for 2026 come out, but if you could provide that to us at that time, that would be helpful too. And which types of funds, how much is available in the fund itself from the state, and what we're going to try to get out of those different funds. I know you keep a real good eye on the MPCA. But they always have about $30 to $40 million a year that they're working on, stormwater, making it available for stormwater projects with the communities and watersheds and so on. Make sure you keep a real close eye on that, because that's a lot of the work that's gonna happen in the Comfort Lake watershed, sub-watershed. And working with the city too. You know, the city's gotta upgrade a lot of their work, and if we can work together on getting a grant through those available funds, that would be great. Great, thank you. Anything else from anyone? No? All right.
Would you like to
Did-
discuss general scheduling or, you know, desired timeline for the next budget workshop?
Can we do that at the next meeting? That's on Thursday, and that gives us a time to look at our schedules. You want to schedule one per week or one every other week, or what would you want to do?
It was, you know, we can meet as often as the board wants. The budget schedule kind of had one meeting per month. So
Mhm.
if we would look at maybe early June for having the next budget workshop, and then that would give me time to connect with other staff, gather the cost estimates and provide that draft budget.
Okay,
And then we can schedule more frequent meetings between June and August if you want more frequent.
well, I want to get it done, so, you know, the sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned, and I don't expect that we're going to have the need to do adjustments on the tail end of the thing, because we're talking through it at the beginning and laying the foundation, so I think this is gonna go smoother. So if you can just give us the date that you're gonna be ready, when you're ready at the next meeting, not tonight, but we can go from there on planning our next budget workshops.
I've actually, you know, I attend most regular board meetings, but I have a conflict with the one this Thursday, so I'm planning on not being there this Thursday, but I can follow up over email with some potential dates and do that kind of scheduling poll if that works for everyone.
Yeah, works for me. I think it'll work for the board. We've lived with that before, so we'll get an email with the first preliminary budget and then a time to meet as well. Okay, good. Sounds good. Is Steve still on board?
He dropped off for a little bit, but
Okay.
he's back.
All right, I'm sure he agrees. Anything else?
Oh, if he left and came back, hold on, I didn't make him co-host. I didn't
Oh,
notice if he. Steve, you
That
have
was
the
my
ability to unmute now. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'm unmuted now, so I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even send a message.
Yep, new security protocols after the last Zoom incident, so
Somehow I got
we gotta
kicked.
make you co-host.
Yeah, somehow I got kicked off. I had to re-enter, so then I couldn't get in. So okay, but we're fine. Just one last. We got a meeting tomorrow at night, and
Thursday.
that's still tomorrow, right? That's still on with them with Ellen.
Thursday though.
Oh.
Oh, tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. Yes, with Ellen.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, just checking. Okay.
Yeah. All right, having no further business before our special meeting, I declare without objection, I declare the meeting ended.
do we need a roll call?
Not really, not when I do that type of
Okay.
thing, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.